Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Kala Chanji Radha Kala Chanji Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Hare Krishna. Good morning, devotees. My name is Manjari Gopika Devi Dasi, and today we will be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 9, verses 1 through 11, and focusing on verse 3. I ask for your blessings that I may speak something pleasing to my spiritual master, to Srila Prabhupada, and to all the devotees. Let us begin by together chanting the invocation prayers. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotamam devim sarvasvatim vyasyam tato jayamudiraye Nashtaprayesha badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So today we are starting a new chapter. Party. Best way to start a Friday. New chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. This chapter is entitled The Supreme Character of Jud Bharat. So again, we will read verses 1 through 11 and focus on verse 3. So we have plenty of time. If everybody could read a verse, 1 through 11. Oh, sorry. We'll grab the microphone. Thank you, Prabhu. Text 1.
Text 1 and 2. Srila Shukadev Goswami continued, My dear king, after giving up the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj took birth in a very pure Brahmana family. There was a Brahmana who belonged to the dynasty of Angira. He was fully qualified with Brahminical qualifications. He could control his mind and senses, and he had studied the Vedic literatures and other subsidiary literatures. He was expert in giving charity, and he was always satisfied, tolerant, very gentle, learned, and non-envious. He was self-realized and engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. He remained always in a trance. He had 9 equally qualified sons by his first wife, and by his second wife he begot twins, a brother and a sister, of which the male child was said to be the topmost devotee and foremost of saintly kings, Bharat Maharaj. This, then, is the story of the birth he took after giving up the body of a deer.
Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmana, he was still very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman, a dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord's glories, which save one from the bondage of fruit of action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates.
The Brahmin father's mind was always filled with affection for his son Jud Bharat, Bharat Maharaj. Therefore, he was always attached to Jud Bharat. Because Jud Bharat was unfit to enter the Grihastha ashram, he simply executed the purificatory process up to the end of the Brahmacharya ashram. Although Jad Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instructions, the Brahmin nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean and how to wash, thinking that the son should be taught by the father.
Jad Bharat behaved before his father like a fool, despite his father's adequately instructing him in Vedic knowledge. He behaved in that way so that his father would know that he was unfit for instruction and would abandon the attempt to instruct him further. He would behave in a completely opposite way. Although instructed to wash his hands after evacuating, he would have washed them before. Nonetheless, his father wanted to give him Vedic instructions during the spring and summer. He tried to teach him the Gayatri mantra, along with Omkara and Vyahurti. But after 4 months, his father still was not successful in instructing him.
Text 6. The Brahmana father of Jada Bharat considered his son his heart and soul, and therefore he was very much attached to him. He thought it was wise to educate his son properly, and being absorbed in this unsuccessful endeavor, he tried to teach his son the rules and regulations of brahmacharya, including the execution of the Vedic vows, cleanliness, study of the Vedas, the regulative methods, service to the spiritual master, and the method of offering a fire sacrifice. He tried his best to teach his son in this way, but all his endeavors failed. In his heart he hoped that his son would be a learned scholar, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. Like everyone, this Brahmana was attached to his home, and he had forgotten that someday he would die. Death, however, was not forgetful. At the proper time, death appeared and took him away.
Thereafter, the Brahmana's younger wife, after entrusting her twin children, the boy and girl, to the elder wife, departed for Patiloka, voluntarily dying with her husband.
After the father died, the 9 stepbrothers of Jad Bharat, who considered Jad Bharat dull and brainless, abandoned the father's attempt to give Jad Bharat a complete education. The stepbrothers of Jad Bharat were learned in the 3 Vedas, the Rig Veda, Samaveda, and Yajur Veda, which very much encourage fruitive activity. The 9 brothers were not at all spiritually enlightened in devotional service to the Lord. Consequently, they could not understand the highly exalted of Jad Bharat.
Educated men are actually no better than animals. The only difference is that animals have 4 legs, such a man have only 2. These 2-legged animalistic men used to call Jad Bharat mad, dull, deaf, and dumb. They mistreated him, and Jad Bharat behaved for them like a madman who was deaf, blind, or dull. He did not protest or to convince them that he was not so. If others wanted him to do something, he acted according to their desires. Whatever food he could acquire by begging or by wigs, and whatever came of its own accord, be it a small quantity, palatable, stale, or tasteless, he would accept and eat. He never ate anything for sense gratification, because he had already liberated from the material concept which induces one to accept palatable or unpalatable food. He was full in transcendental consciousness of devotional service. Therefore, he was unaffected by dualities arising from bodily conception. Actually, his body was as strong as a bull's. His limbs were very muscular. He didn't care for winter or summer, wind or rain. He never covered his body at any time. He lay on the ground, never smeared oil on his body or took a bath. Because his body was dirty, his spiritual effulgence and knowledge were covered. just as the splendor of a valuable gem is covered by dirt. He only wore a dirty lion cloth and his sacred thread, which was blackish. Understanding that he was born in a Brahmana family, people would call him Brahmabandhu and other names. Being thus insulted and neglected by materialistic people, he wandered here and there.
Jud Bharat used to work only for food. His stepbrothers took advantage of this and engaged him in agricultural field work in exchange for some food. But actually, he did not know how to work very well in the field. He did not know where to spread dirt or where to make the ground level or uneven. His brothers used to give him broken rice, oil cakes, the chaff of rice, worm-eaten grains, and burned grains that had stuck to the pot. But he gladly accepted all this as if it were nectar. He did not hold any grudges and ate all this very gladly.
Okay. We'll return now to verse 3. This verse is in prose, so we will go directly to the English translation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmin, he was still very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman, dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord's glories, which save one from the bondage of fruitive action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates. Purport. Every living entity is bound by different activities due to association with the modes of nature. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Karanam guna sangosya sad asad yoni janmasu. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Bhagavad Gita 13.22. We get different types of bodies among 8,400,000 species according to our karma. Karmana daiva netrena. We work under the influence of material nature contaminated by the three modes, and thus we get a certain type of body according to superior order. This is called karma bandha. To get out of this karma bandha, one must engage himself in devotional service. Then one will not be affected by the modes of material nature. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuya yakolpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14.26. To remain immune from material qualities, one must engage himself in devotional service. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. That is the perfection of life. When Maharaj Bharat took birth as a Brahmin, he was not very interested in the duties of a Brahmin. But within, he remained a pure Vaishnav, always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. As advised in Bhagavad Gita, Manmana Bhavabhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskaru. This is the only process by which one can be saved from the danger of repeated birth and death. In order to understand Jud Bharat's actions, we should review what happened in his previous lives. I know many people come regularly, and we've been hearing the last couple of days of his life as Bharat Maharaj, but there may be some people who haven't heard it, but also it's always good to review. So, in Jud Bharat's previous life, the life before last, actually, he was a great king named Bharat Maharaj. And in his later years, Bharat Maharaj gave up everything. His kingdom, his wealth, his family, his power, for self-realization. He went to the Kala Gandaki River in the Himalayas, where he sat in meditation, performing sadhana and bhakti, becoming very advanced in his spiritual practice. One day, he saw a deer drowning in the river, a little fawn, and he thought, oh, I'll save this deer. So he did. He picked up the deer and he rescued her. And after that, the deer began to depend on him. He fed her, cared for her. He became like a mother, father, sister, brother to her. He loved this deer very much, a little too much, and as a result, he became a deer in his next life. Then in that life as a deer, though, and it's mentioned here, Bharat Maharaj, now known as Jad Bharat, in this lifetime, the Lord blessed him with the ability to remember his lives, his past lives. So in his body of a deer, he realized his mistake as Bharat Maharaj. And he thought, what nonsense. I did all these years of devotional service, all these years of sadhana and austerity, but there was still in me ego. The belief that I am the doer, that I am the proprietor. And sometimes we think that ego only manifests in bad actions, when we yell at someone because they've frustrated our desires. But there can also be false ego in charity if we think that, I am the benefactor. Everything relies on my grace. So because of that false ego, he had to take another birth as a deer, but he gained good realization from that experience. He understood that he couldn't fully develop God consciousness in his previous lives, but he resolved that, okay, in my next human life, there will be no false ego. In his next life, he is born as Jad Bharat, and he behaved in such a way that everyone would hate him. Whatever his father, a first-class Brahmin, asked him to do, he would deliberately do the opposite. People thought he was disgusting. They tried to train him, but there was nothing they could do. Though he appeared to be a fool, he was fully conscious and liberated. He knew that if he did anything right, he would become proud of his actions. He would think of himself in terms of society. He would think of himself as a Brahmin. And so he decided to act in the most useless and ridiculous way so that people would think that's who he is. He's a useless, ridiculous person. Let's leave him alone. His own brothers, his whole society condemned him, thinking he was crazy. But he thought, this is very nice. I can never become proud in this situation. The story is very instructive in many ways. We cannot imitate Jad Bharat, but we can understand to the extent to which he avoided any false prestige or the idea that he was the doer. This is how subtle false ego can be. Even though Jad Bharat was in a state of bhav, a very advanced stage of bhakti in his life as Maharaj Bharat, as soon as he thought, I am helping someone, they depend on me, they can't live without me, I am their rescuer, I am their maintainer, he fell into illusion. Therefore, if we have the association of Vaishnavas and the mercy of Gurudev, we must learn, we must train ourselves to always think that everything is due to their grace, their greatness, and their power and mercy. Jad Bharat also teaches us lessons in what we should be detached from and what we should be attached to. Real Krishna consciousness is a state of the heart. It's said in Srimad Bhagavatam that first in natural progression, we have a little faith, adau shraddha, just a little seed of faith. And then gradually a transformation of the heart takes place. And one develops a deep emotional attachment to serving Krishna. This stage is called rati. And finally, when that stage fully matures, it becomes unalloyed love for Krishna, prem. And so only at that stage can we truly speak of bhakti. At any other stage, it's not yet uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service. So generally speaking, devotional service is performed by those like ourselves, conditioned souls. So our situation is very different from Jad Bharat. In a previous life, he had already reached the stage of bhav, or stage of rati. Then in spite of being advanced, due to neglect of his devotional service, he fell down. But he had been granted, even as a deer, that remembrance, that special grace of the Lord. So then in the third life as Jad Bharat, Am I doing something wrong with the mic? It's being staticky. So then in his third life, with that remembrance, remembering how easily he had been pulled away by illusory energy, he had one desire to be Krishna conscious. Because of the strength of that desire, Jad Bharat could take on a very, very renounced position. One cannot take a renounced position if in one's heart one is not resolved to serve Krishna only. The root cause of all of our problems is the lack of commitment in our heart. The root cause is when we are not sure that all happiness comes with Krishna. It means that our faith in Krishna has not really matured. So the word Shraddha, which is that first stage of devotional service, the word Shraddha means the firm determination that by serving Krishna, all good things will come. Faith is based on our desire. The living being is by nature pleasure-seeking. So wherever we believe that happiness is found, that's where we'll direct our faith. For example, if we think that happiness is found in money, then all of our actions will go into earning as much money as possible and keeping that money. If we think that happiness is found in sex life, then all of our efforts will go to that. If we think happiness is in having children and giving them as much as possible, then all of our efforts will go to that. If we think that happiness is found in having the perfect body, then all of our time will go to that. I have a friend, she's a wonderful devotee, but before she was a devotee, she told me she was very into CrossFit, which if anybody knows, it's this kind of like club team way of strength training, very intense, and they do competitions. Yeah, and she told me that on her gym days, she would be there for 3 hours. 3 hours. And I said to her, I work out every day, but like 3 hours. And she said, I was like, that's really intense. She said it was. And I said, aren't you like sore all the time? And she said, yeah, but there was such satisfaction knowing that you had the perfect body and that you had created it. So there are people that they think this is where their happiness is coming from. You know, thankfully, she's totally on a different platform now. Wonderful devotee. So Jad Bharat had a lot deposited in his spiritual bank account, his spiritual bank balance from his previous lives. Therefore, in this one, he could take a very renounced position. He could go to this extreme. He could draw on that in this state of renunciation. And he remained very innocent. He didn't allow himself to get caught up in the workings of society. He stayed away from all the duties that would be, forced upon him in a Brahmin family. And one of the qualities of devotee is simplicity, and that also means no duplicity. And we see that in Jad Bharat. He's very clear in what he wants. His Holiness Kadamba Swami Maharaj said that Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to be applied to our lives. We shouldn't listen to this story of Jad Bharat and think, well, that's kind of weird, a little intense there. Instead, we have to see, okay, who are we in comparison to Jad Bharat? Where are we in terms of our determination? Jad Bharat had a high level of integrity that he wouldn't compromise. Well, how much integrity do we have? Maybe we're strict about certain rules, but when it's more convenient for us, we break them just like that. No one's even looking. What does it matter? So we can be purified from Bhagavatam without imitating Jad Bharat, and instead be inspired and think, I must find this internal motivation like Jad Bharat. His Holiness Kadamba Swami said, it's not that we have to wait. Oh, when will I be a pure devotee? When will the light go on? He said, the light will go on when we decide to turn it on. Pretty hard thing for me to hear, because I clearly haven't flicked the light switch. When we decide to make the commitment as Jad Bharat did, he said, then we'll be pure devotees. And so this is the real purpose of this particular episode of Bhagavatam, to inspire us to reach for pure devotional service. So Jad Bharat was very renounced. He was detached from material desires for prestige and detached from relationships with non-devotees. So how do we become detached? In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, Verse 20, Lord Kapila Dev says, "Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation." Attachment cannot be killed. It can simply be transferred. Attachment for material things is called material consciousness. Attachment for Krishna or his devotees is called Krishna consciousness. Consciousness is therefore the platform of attachment. And it's clearly stated in that verse in the third canto that when we simply purify the consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness, we attain liberation. Prabhupada notes that despite this statement that one should give up attachment, desirelessness is not possible for a living entity. A living entity, by constitution, has the propensity to be attached to something. Prabhupada even said, we see that if someone has no attachment to anything in their life, no object of attachment, if they have no children, if they have no family, if they have no religion, then often they transfer their attachment to cats and dogs. We see that. People make their little babies, they make a family member. Right? We have, as living entities, that propensity to be attached, to love, to devote ourselves to something. And this indicates that the attachment cannot be stopped. It must be utilized for the best purpose. However, that same attachment, again, when transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is perfect. It gives us liberation, and it gives us, or his devotees, and it gives us what we're actually seeking. So it's recommended that attachment should be transferred to the self-realized devotees in that verse, to the sadhus. So who is a sadhu? Prabhupada said a sadhu is not just, an ordinary man in an orange cloth with a long beard. A sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as one who unflinchingly engages in devotional service. It even says in Bhagavad Gita, if one is found not to be following the strict rules and regulations of devotional service, if one simply has unflinching faith in Krishna or his representative, he or she is understood to be a sadhu. A sadhu is a strict follower of devotional service. So it's recommended that if at all one wants to reach spiritual perfection, that attachment that we have to material things should be transferred to the devotee. And Lord Chaitanya also confirms this, that famous verse, Lava Matra Sadhu Sange Sarva Siddhihai. Simply by a moment's association with a sadhu, one can attain all perfection. Mahatma is also a synonym of sadhu, and we hear that in many verses in Bhagavad Gita. It's said that service to a Mahatma, or elevated devotee of the Lord, is Dvaram Ahur Vimukte, the royal road of liberation. Mahat Sevam Dvaram Ahur Vimuktes Tamo Dvaram Yoshitam Sangi Sanganam. That's Bhagavatam 5.5.2. Rendering service to material energy, to materialistic people, has the opposite effect. If anyone offers service to a materialist or a person engaged only in sense enjoyment, then by association, by such person, the door to hell is opened. That's what the scripture says. But attachment to a devotee is attachment to the service of the Lord. Because if one associates with the sadhu, a Mahatma, the result will be that they will teach you how to become a devotee and a worshiper and a sincere servitor of the Lord. Those are the gifts of a sadhu. A sadhu can't give you anything material. They will give you instructions on how to cut the knot of contamination of material attraction and how to elevate ourselves in devotional service. I listened to a class not too long ago by His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. He spoke on Bhagavad Gita 9.14, Satatam Kirtiyantomam. And in that class, His Holiness Giriraj Swami said, Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha, from Bhagavad Gita 2.62. By association, one's desires develop. If we associate with Mahatmas, we will desire to become like them, Krishna conscious. If we associate with Duratmas, we will become like them. We will degrade ourselves. So we should ask ourselves, where am I putting my faith? Because remember, we spend the most time doing the things that we believe will bring us happiness. So how am I spending the majority of my free time? And I say free time because, this is Kali Yuga, this is the material world, a lot of us have to work. But we have to spiritualize the hours that we're not. So what is our inclination to do in those hours where we have free time? Is it online shopping? Is it seeing movies? Is it going to kirtans and lectures or practicing mridanga? Is it seeking out other devotees? Is it Hulu? Is it reading, a couple verses a day? What is it? We have to ask ourselves that. And then maybe think of some goals. Not to put myself on a pedestal because I'm preaching to myself here, but I made a very simple goal. I'm laughing, you'll know why. I made a very simple goal a few years ago, and I heard Ajit Prabhu in one of your classes last week. You made the same goal. My same goal, the goal is very simple. What was your goal? You don't remember? I remember. The goal was I was like, I am going to finish the Srimad Bhagavatam before I die. Or hopefully at least before I'm 40. I'm laughing because it's taking me a long time. I don't know if I retain it, but I'm still going. But but at least I'm on the 11th canto, part 2. So Radhakala Chenji, please help me to keep going. But then you got to think, okay, once I'm done with that, which canto do I start over with? And do I go to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, or is it Chaitanya Charitamrita? But I have felt that at least making these goals, then it helps me spiritualize my free time, Anyway, so I'll just close with this. When I was growing up, my mom often said this phrase to me. You can tell a lot about a person based on who their friends are. So who are we spending our time with? We are our attachments, because our attachments are our consciousness. So I would like to hear from you now about any reflections or comments, questions. Hare Krishna.
So you made a very powerful statement about being committed in the heart. And I just would like you to elaborate a little bit more on that very powerful statement. Thank you. Nice class, by the way.
Well, Mother Kunti, I would like for you to elaborate on it, because how many years have you spent in devotional service?
The flies sometimes sit on the lap of the spiritual master. Okay? It doesn't mean they're qualified. So please, I'm begging at your lotus feet to kindly elaborate.
Well, I have no qualification to really answer that. When Mother Kunti raises her hand, I go, oh no, because she's so advanced. Please don't ask me. Okay, so I said that real Krishna consciousness is a state of the heart. Well, our consciousness is in our heart, which if you grow up like in a Western society, we often think that our thoughts and our motivations come from the brain, because that's our Western psychology is based on. The decisions come from the brain. But our consciousness is in our heart. This is where our attachments live. So real Krishna consciousness is a state of the heart, because we want to be operating from that space without analyzing, how is this going to benefit me? How will it make me look? We should be thinking only about what is pleasing to Krishna, what is pleasing to my spiritual master. And when we operate from that heart space, then all of our decisions and all of our actions are perfect.
Thank you.
Priya, you want to comment on that? Sorry, Prabhu.
No, I have a question.
Oh no, give it back to Ajit.
I'm just thinking that, Jad Bharat, he had this strategy for avoiding bad association, but from our perspective, it seems a little extreme, to just like pretend that you're deaf, dumb, and dull, and unteachable, and that's not the method, that we used. So what is advisable for us? Like, how do we apply the same principle of avoiding association? What are our strategies for keeping ourselves aloof from bad association?
Well, rather than focusing on the don'ts, focus on the do. So instead of thinking how to be, remove ourselves from materialists, it's easier to think about how can I spend more time with devotees? How can I organize my life in such a way that they are the people I'm spending the majority of my time with? And by developing our attachment to them and our relationships with them, maybe getting service from them, then our time to spend with materialistic people is much less. And also, as someone who, I've always had a job, I've always worked in the world, it's my karma. I think about, I guess, like when I'm in the office, I spend more time with, hours-wise, with them than I do with devotees. But it's about also just having a maturity in your relationship, with others. That you're going to be, I'm going to be respectful of my coworkers and my superiors, and I certainly want to act with integrity and kindness. But I'm not going to form super close heart relationships with them, and I'm not going to go to them for life advice because they have very different goals than I do. Ajit Prabhu, what would you want to say?
Thank you for the nice class. Yeah, I had a similar question on, how do we apply this to us? Like, for example, we hear about dharma, that we have a certain dharma to like our parents, and Jad Bharat seems to have like a good father, like from a Vedic perspective. But then he wasn't being honest with them. He was pretending like he couldn't understand him or anything. And we could see that as being like maybe disrespectful or something. So, but I guess Sanatana Dharma trumps Dharma sometimes, I guess, like his eternal nature as a servant of Krishna. I'm wondering what you think about this. It's hard to apply this one, I find.
Well, again, Jad Bharat, like as I mentioned in the class, he had a very high level of renunciation. He and Krishna seem to have some kind of arrangement, because this soul can remember his previous lives. He's on a mission. He can remember the things that he did wrong, and this time he's determined he's not going to mess it up. So he's going to go to extreme lengths to not mess it up. It's like if you're an Olympian and you're in like the very end of the competition, all you're thinking about is getting that medal. So in that sense, we cannot apply that extreme renunciation of disobeying our parents who are, maybe pious people trying to help us. I listened to a class by my spiritual master. He was speaking on Prahlad Maharaj, and he said, he's speaking of Prahlad Maharaj and his father, Hiranyakashipu, and he said that it's very natural to feel a special kind of affection for the people that are in closest proximity to us. It's very natural to feel a deeper kind of affection for the people who have raised us, who have maintained us. But if we look at the example of Prahlad Maharaj, when Lord Nrsimhadev came to save him, he didn't say, "Don't kill my dad." Even though his whole life he was saying like so many wonderful, he was praising his father, calling him the best of the asuras, and happily sitting in his lap and trying to please him while at the same time trying to please Lord Vishnu. He did not say, "Don't kill my father." He had concern that was beyond the bodily concept. He asked him, please give him liberation. Because he loved his father so much, what he really wanted for him was to be elevated to the position of devotional service. So in our relationships, we must, with parents, certainly if anything is coming in conflict with our devotional service, we should seek out the advice of the spiritual master, or if the spiritual master is not readily available, then a very senior god sister, god brother, or senior Vaishnav. But in general, we should behave in a way that gives a good impression of devotees, of Krishna consciousness, and, put distance where there needs to be distance. And at the same time, try to give them some kind of spirituality to really show our love for them, whether it's a book or prasadam.
Thank you. I have a somewhat follow-up question. This Jad Bharat reminds me of some devotees that are actually really advanced, but they don't want to give class,
What are you saying about me?
and I'm nothing, and somehow
I know, I'm not
give
either.
class. So I don't know. What do you think
What I
about
think,
that? Sometimes I wonder, it's are they doing the right thing, or am I just arrogant, or what is it?
well, I know somehow I keep being given this service because I don't say no. But so my opinion, whatever it's worth, which is probably not very much, but my opinion is that we should think about what is most pleasing to the devotees, the spiritual master, and Krishna. And sometimes our ego can prevent us from doing things. I've seen people in my life who have, I feel, a little too much humility. So anytime something is asked of them at the temple, they say no, because they think they're so fallen and they're so unqualified. And my thinking is, but they need help and they asked you, why don't you just say yes? But also, my spiritual master, I know with a godbrother, I have a godbrother who's very, very shy, and he very learned, wonderful. He was a brahmachari for many years. And my spiritual master pointed to him and said, for you, speaking is an austerity, so you should give class. So sometimes the things that are hard for us are the things that will purify us. So I can't speak as to the decisions of what other people are making, but that is, one viewpoint. He didn't want to give class, but his spiritual master said, this is actually what you need because you don't want to do it and you're very shy. This is tapasya for you. For other people, not being called on in class, that's probably tapasya. Okay.
Thank you for a very nice class, and you mentioned all the points today, how to analyze or understand Bharat Maharaj's experiences. So yesterday, when I was thinking about it, the thought came to my mind was that example of either the spider or the squirrel and Hanuman when they are taking
the grains of
sand or a boulder to make the bridge. So Lord Ramachandra's expectation of Hanuman wasn't that he would be taking little things of sand, but his expectation of the spider was that, okay, he would just take that little thing of sand. So I guess because he is Bharat Maharaj, because he was the emperor of the entire planet, the expectation was that, no, he shouldn't get distracted by a deer. And so when he did, then he had certain consequences that he had to deal with.
Yeah, I really like that. Thank you.
And then, so to translate that to our lives is okay, so how do we know where we are? Are we near the spider? Are we near? So then it's okay, to be in the stretch zone. So, certain things might come easy for us in devotional life, and certain things might be harder. So for us to individually analyze what is it that pushes us in the stretch zone. I think that's what Radha Govinda Prabhu one time had said, the stretch zone, not to be in the stress zone, not to be in the comfort zone, but to be in so when we're, whatever service it is that is pushing us.
Anyone else? I think anytime that you have a, did you raise your hand? No? Oh. I think anytime that we have a goal and we're working towards a goal, there are going to be days that are hard and there are going to be days that are easy, and that's just part of the process, and to remember that you will need both. There has to be that little bit of, tapasya. But if it wasn't, just devotional service wasn't enjoyable, I mean, that's actually what our heart is made to do, is to get attached to that. But it takes time for it to taste like nectar in some cases. Anyone else have any thoughts? Or it is. Life is so dull without it. I had this realization after Janmashtami. Did everybody go to the Janmashtami festival? So for the first time this year, I took the day off from work. Would you have a question? No, you go. No, well, for the first time it fell on a Monday, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take the whole day off of work. And my daughter didn't have school, and so we stayed at the temple all day. I came for Guru Puja, and I stayed all the way through. We left at 8:30 p.m. And we stayed for the kirtan, and we went outside, we watched all the performances. It was really nice. And then the next day, at Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, I realized, wow, I was completely satisfied. I was completely fulfilled that entire day. You know what I mean? There wasn't one moment where I was like, man, I wish I could go home and read, or I wish I wasn't around so many devotees, or God, I can't wait to go home and watch Netflix. There wasn't one moment where I wasn't fully enjoying Krishna consciousness. And that it is really, life is so dull without it. I'm like, oh my God, I want every day to be like this when I'm not at the temple. Yeah. What were you going to say, Premarita?
Hare Krishna. Thank you for an amazing class, as always. You spoke a lot about attachment, like we need to let go of lower attachment, like develop the higher taste. Basically, we can't be not attached. We have to be attached to something, so we can be attached to Krishna, and if that's too high, we can be attached to Krishna's devotees. How do we make sure that we're attached to Krishna's devotees in the proper way? Because people can, I've heard examples of someone can be attached to their guru, and they're actually expecting their guru to fulfill their daddy issues, and they're going to him in an inappropriate way of wanting him to just play that role when that's not his role. He's guru. Or in other examples, like in a marriage, or in so many. How do we make sure that our attachment to devotees is the way it's supposed to be?
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that they would like to share? Answering that? I feel like Mother Kunti.
Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. At initiations over the years, Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj would always say, this is like having children. And so if someone has an inclination to think of the Guru in a fatherly way, then that is absolutely okay, at least according to my Gurudev. There's no problem there. The issue comes when he gives an instruction once, twice, 3 times, and the person's still not listening, okay? That's when it's inappropriate. That's when they have to examine, okay, what am I doing here? And yeah, father and the Vedas are the mother, the Shastra, right? Yeah. Anybody else?
I'm not so much concerned with that example itself, but more of the principle of proper attachment to devotees.
Well, I think Kalakanta Prabhu spoke on this when he was here, about how you need three types of healthy relationships: one with someone who's beneath you, one who's someone's equal to you, and one with someone who is above you. And you have to interact with those people based on that platform. And I guess it can take some time for us definitely to understand that Guru is not an ordinary person, and he's not here to tell us every little detail about what we're supposed to do with our lives. There are very few disciples of Srila Prabhupada who had intimate association with him, and he did personally train them. But he personally trained them so that then they could go and train everyone else in the society. So really we should always, when it comes to guru, I believe, study a senior godbrother or godsister who really understands guru's mood and guru's mission, and understand what is pleasing to them, and go to them for advice. And it takes some time to notice these nuances. Like I know Drishtadyumna Prabhu once pointed out how when we first come to Krishna consciousness as adhikaris, although I still am one, you tend to view everybody as a pure devotee, you know? Every devotee is like, oh, you put them, you know, higher. And then eventually, right? And then as you learn, you go, oh, actually, this is someone that I should be following, who can guide me. And then we don't associate so intimately with those who are, you know, we associate intimately with those who are equal to us, and not so much those who are higher or below us, because below us can be confusing, and then above us we could really create offenses. So there has to be some sort of gap. Again, I rely a lot on His Grace Gokulananda Prabhu to guide me in these things, so I wish he was here to answer that. Oh, Prabhupada Priya.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I wouldn't get overly worried about why you're attached to a devotee. Attachment to Vaishnavas and attachment to Krishna is so rare and so essential that whatever is the cause of your attachment, just be attached.
I love that.
And then everything will be sort of, you know, things will be adjusted. Krishna will purify it. Right? Even Krishna says that if someone approaches me, whether they approach me with reverence, with affection, with lust, with greed, with envy, it doesn't matter. Just approach, you know, like they'll all get purified. He loves them all, you know? And then in Bhagavad Gita also he says 4 different kinds of people, the distressed and inquisitive, desiring wealth, or the person who really wants to know him. So Krishna's like, don't get mental, you know, about why you're approaching me or why you're approaching my devotee. Just approach my devotees, right? And also like gradually as we continue to perform devotional service, then our relationships with devotees change. Because in the beginning it's all about me and how I can benefit from them in some way, right? But as we get purified, our attitude shifts to more like, how can I serve them? How can I please the devotees? So as soon as our attitude starts going to how can I please the devotee, then automatically our attitude, our relationship with the devotee will become more favorable, because we'll realize how, you know, misusing the relationship is actually not helping the relationship. It's actually displeasing it makes the person maybe uncomfortable, and maybe it causes them to distance themselves with us because they're feeling like, oh, I'm not here to, you know, the guru's not meant to fulfill the role of, you know, the psychologist or the husband or the whatever, you know. So then when we see the reactions and we look within, we become introspective about our relationship and our mood of approaching our guru, and we'll see that Krishna will show us, you know, when we're sincere, Krishna shows us these things, and we're like, oh shoot, you know, and then we can just apologize, you know, Guru Maharaj, I'm sorry that I was like interacting with you like this and approaching with these kind of questions and problems. I'm going to try to really observe proper etiquette of guru-disciple relationship from now on. Like that, we grow. But don't think, oh, maybe my mood is bad, I should not be with devotees. I should cut this attachment because it's inappropriate. No, don't cut the attachment. That attachment is going to take us back to Godhead. Like Manjari Gopika was saying, that attachment to devotees opens the door to liberation.
Thank you so much, Prabhupada Priya. That was a perfect answer. I could speak Bhagavatam with you guys all day, rather not on the Vyasasan, but it is breakfast time, so we should end here. So thank you all very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.